So there's a level of knowledge, there's a level of awareness and wisdom here, and it is in every aspect hidden from the uninitiated, the one who does not know how to read through the symbols. And even what we're seeing now as a symbolism is not even the deepest symbolism yet. Like, for instance, let's give some examples. This first picture that I was sourcing today on the thumbnail. Let me move this to another area. Give me 1 second. Move this down here. Okay. So I had this image in the thumbnail, right? Ooh, Naga. Yes, for sure. You know, there's a lot here, but there's something very important going on here. Now, first of all, this reveals deep levels of knowledge and wisdom. Not only can you see the pygmy bees sitting in the back, this is right here at the top in the center above the Naga's head. There's another entity there. That entity is known as beast, which is a pygmy, right? Then we also see a sun and a moon, a sun on the left side, a moon on the right side, okay? As we keep scrolling down, we see what is actually a knot. I've put a video of Praveen Mohan, who's just, you know, cool brother, man, doing a lot of research all the time in India, just be up in the temple, like all the places, especially in the Tamil Nadu in the South India, where they've forgotten where the darker Indians are. And this is where the temples have been abandoned with the cymatic still in them. And what you'll find is, and there are many of these, and there are these knots. And so what he did was he did this experiment where he had this notion that these were knots, and they are for sure knots. And he started putting them all together. Like he started just grabbing some rope and putting it into the same knots as were in many of these temples. And what he was noticing is that many of these knots were the same knots from even today in the Boys and Girl Scouts. More importantly, the knots from nautical engineers. Like when you're sailing boats, there's different knots for different things. If you remember, that's a big part of history that's kind of missing for us is, you know, for many of us, we didn't get taught how to tie knots. We got taught to tie our shoes. That's it. But there are other knots, and there's a reason why. The weaving is a knot. It's a certain type of interlocking knot. And you can create clothes like even Nike right now, they're using the fly stitch. When you look at the fly stitch, they patent the fly stitch. The fly stitch is stolen from these knots. Right. And these shoes are fly. If you got some fly stitch shoes, you know, they just never die. It's like they're just still sitting in there like comfortable as ever, looking raggedy, but super comfortable and never ripping or anything because of the way that the knot is put together. But see, for the ancients, the knot had a very deep meaning because it's the key to how to braid DNA. Okay. So before I get too far ahead of myself, again, in temples, you can look up Praveen Mohan and see his work on knots. It's on Secret Energy. There's these different symbols of these serpents, right? Now, this symbol of the serpent in this empire is the same as the symbol of the bird in the one that we're in now, except for in our world, the serpent is demonized. In their world, the serpent was revered for a multitude of reasons that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But in every tense of it, so if they were going to show what they revere the most, they were going to always show at the height of power 2 snakes, because it meant that 2 empires, if you may, or 2, they used to call it the 2 Egypts, the 2 centers of the world, which were still seen in themselves to be serpentine or energetic, had come together and had formed and created something. So let's look at this again. We notice there's a reference here to being about the sun and the moon, because the sun and the moon give off 2 opposite energies that are needed to create life. The sun and the moon also symbolically become the male and the female. And you'll notice if you look very closely that the knots on one side are not going in the same direction as the knots on the other side. Okay, because this is about how to tie 2 forces together that are really opposing forces. Okay, so to be honest, the knowledge that a lot of times that those who moved on from speculation are searching for is that knowledge. That's why things have gotten to this point now with DNA. It's like you can have everything you want in the world, externally, but to go into the holiest of holies, to go into DNA and to be able to create the things that you want, living and breathing, would be like being a god, because that's what the gods did. So let's clarify with the data set very briefly of how we know that. Let's put the data set to use right away. We want the data set to tell us about these tying of knots, because since I already connected the knots to DNA, I have to, for a moment, connect the Naga with the time in the world where it's recorded that the DNA had been tampered with, if you may, or changed. Okay, so when I'm coming to here, because I've already done my work, so I'm not just gonna come on here today and start Googling everything, even though we'll put the raw power to the test. But right now we're just going to a bookmark. This bookmark says Nagas and Herman. That could say even better, Nagas on Mount Herman. So for those of the occultists out there, they know that there's this situation that goes on Mount Herman in every single spiritual ancient book, including the Rig Vedas. And the Mount Herman becomes also where we get the word harmony from. Now, I've always wondered why the word harmony has harm in it. And it definitely has to do with the corruption of the word, because every time you get this word that means bringing life, but now it means taking life, you know that there's been some corruption to the word. And for some reason, that seems to always happen to any knowledge around the Nagas. And that's going to come for a reason that's quite evident as we continuously go through this build today. But we have to establish that, because the Bible did not identify those angels that were on Mount Hermon. They just said that there was these angels that came down and they did some things. So let's just read it from here. Let me just pull up my keyword here. Actually, let me just go here. I go on my data set. I type in Herman. And let us look here. We're going to read here. Now, I will say that I am not proficient in Hindi, Sanskrit, or those languages. So when I'm reading something, I may just fall down the word. So just know that I'm not, a linguist in Hindi, but I'm trying. I'll get through the process. Okay. I know how to sound out. So we're going to read here very, very briefly, because this is an important time in humanity's history. This is what actually brings us here today as human beings. Somebody had to do the work. Somebody had to tie the knots. The knots are the DNA. They are the weaving of how you put different life forms together in order to create. All right now, any kind of secret societies or whatever, this is the knowledge that they were looking for, was how to braid DNA properly so that it is good, so something will happen, so something will come into existence. So it says Lanka is said to be located near the Mount Trikuta, or the three-peaked mountain. Trikuta was apparently the same as Trikukaba, the Trikukaba mountain of the Vedic text, for its sense having three humps like peaks. And the meaning of its name pointed to Hermon Mountain in Lebanon. Okay. Mount Hermon is well known for its three rounded peaks on the top. The description of Trikuta Mountain as rich in minerals value agrees well with the Athra Veda's description of the Trikabu as a source of salve, and that of Stibian, which is alimony, from which salve used to be made, was a high-priced luxury commodity of the ancients. The gift of salve in Beni Hassan's reliefs in Egypt. The myth of Kadru, the mother of the Nagas, revealed that the Trikudra, the three Kadru in the Rig Veda, was another name of the same three-peaked Hermon mountain. Lanka and Sanka both are Gotra names in the Panini's list of Gotras, which indicated that both were place names. Both names in the epic Purana signify or mean serpent. That is, both were places in ancient Lebanon or cuneiform country, Nahas. Okay, let me just check this out and see if I need to read any further here. Okay, so what we're confirming here just by this text is that it was the Nagas who end up coming down on Mount Hermon. And that is confirmed in the Rig Veda, but is not confirmed in the Bible at all, or in any of the Hebraic texts. Now, what we're going to see is let me see, Naga. Give me 1 second. Actually, let me just go to my bookmarks here. The next thing we're going to confirm is that the Naga actually are seraphim, which in the Hebraic text, it actually speaks of the seraphim being the highest of the angelic classes, right? So there's seraphim, there's the cherubim, there's even the Rephim, there's the Nephilim, and then there's the Ish, okay? So seraphim are way up there. But watch how, again, that if you don't know any of this knowledge or you're not able to get the ancient text, then they have one over there thinking the seraphim. I mean, who knows? They're like these, I don't know. They're like these European angels that fly around with big wings. That's like seraphim right now. But look at what Pierre says here in Holographic Culture. According to the apocryphal account of Amram, the reptile is said to rule over all of mankind, a species indicative in the biblical exegesis of the Elohim, the lofty ones, the plural noun used to specify God. So he has a image here. It's the stone carving in India, the Naga Sanskrit or serpent, a deity equivalent in the Judaic traditions to the seraphim, a serpent or non-human angel. Okay, so shared in common with many other types of angelic beings in the Middle and the Far East, the Watchers are virtually identical in the Judaic traditions with the Irim and the Elohim types of the Seraphim. Each of these classes of divinities are all registered with light and correlated with sight. Okay, because what is DNA? DNA is light. So to be able to manipulate DNA, you need to be able to manipulate light. And that's why they later on become known as the Axari, which means the Brotherhood of Light, which is today what we get as the Illuminati, because now the whole thing is corrupted. All of the place that this knowledge came from, just like you see Dindar, was destroyed and burnt to the ground. They burnt even the people. And there's recordings of that. They tried to blot the Nagas or NGS out of the documents of everything, and that became the missing link. Because if you don't know what happened, like if you don't know where everybody came from, then you won't really know anything about where we're going or what happened or what's going on. And this is what, again, that we're here to clarify. So we only established two things here at this point from the data set. And that's one, that on Mount Hermon, specifically, it was the Nagas who were on Mount Hermon, and specifically that the Nagas are seraphim, and specifically that the Nagas work with light. And specifically, they work with light in a way of tying knots. And specifically, that tying knots is tying bloodlines together. Symbolically as seven, here as a seven, because that was known as the seven rivers. Why? Because there are seven outflows of the Nile. Okay? So there's seven outflows of the Nile River.